Welcome to this new tutorial about how to fix Kontakt patches. People have asked about this because I've mentioned this in a ton of videos that I like to fix my Kontakt patches and that sometimes I get mad when developers lock the backend or when they, use players where you can't fix the patches yourself. So let's go through this. I'll walk you a little bit through the Kontakt backend. It's been a while since I worked in it actually, but I'll remember most of it, I think. And I can just show you how to fix little inconsistencies yourself because, sometimes customer support can be slow or sometimes you have to wait for an update to come out. And if you know your way around the backend a little bit, you will actually be able to fix a lot of the tiny things that might be bothering you. So let's get into it. All right. So I've loaded up a bunch of patches here. It's just patches that I know really well. So just because I worked in them and made some of these. So it's easier for me to explain. But it's kind of the same for all developers, at least the ones that allow you to go into the backend. You do, I think, need the full version of Kontakt in order to do that, though. So here we have Cinestrings, one of the libraries that I actually helped make. And in any library, if you click on this wrench, you are transported into the late 90s because I don't think this interface has changed since the 90s. I'm not entirely sure. It certainly has not evolved over the past 15, 20 years. It's pretty ugly. The only reason I would not complain about it is because it actually works, but it's a very German concept. It's not about the design, it's about that it works. Fine. Okay, so you go into expert mode here. So here you can still see your libraries, files, database, whatever. Doesn't matter. Expert mode is what we want because we're experts now because we clicked on the wrench. So on the left here, you can see the so-called groups. How can I best explain that? Let me explain how this is lined up. So the different groups contain the samples that belong to said group. So let me explain what this means. FM over here means full mix. So these are all the samples that are using the full mix mics. When you enable that, these are the samples that are going to play. Then if you scroll further down, you get SP, exactly the same sample set, but the spot mic. I think this was the first chair spot mic or something that we had on here. Then scroll further down, you get another duplicate of the sample set. These are the close mics. Then scroll further down and you get the room mics, RM. And then scroll further down and you get the surround mics, SR. So this is the same sample set like 5 or 6 times, basically, but just the different mic positions. It looks a lot, it is a lot, but okay. So here you have V1, V5, that is velocity. So this is velocity 1, that is the softest velocity. Velocity 5 is the highest velocity. And that goes for every group here. You see some only have like 3 velocities, some have 4 velocities, some have 5 velocities. And then the first thing here is the articulation. NVIP is non-vibrato, VIP is vibrato, ESP is espressivo, SPC is spiccato, STC is staccato, MRC is marcato, SFZ is sforzando. Then you have another non-VIP, VIP and espressivo group. These have a little -R in there. That means those are the release samples. I'll explain later when those are triggered. But so these are identical groups to the ones at the top, but they're playing the releases. Then you have the legato groups. They contain all the legato samples, of course, that are triggered in between notes. Marcato releases as well. Tremolo only has 2 velocities. SP trum is sulpon tremolo, also 2 velocities. Then for both of those, you have the release samples again. Then you have halftone trill and whole tone trill, also 2 velocities. Then again, release groups for those as well. And then the room tone. That's all the sample sets in here, and that's just one mic position. So it's a huge sample set. You can see the patch is almost 1 gigabyte of RAM large just by itself. So that's the groups that contain the samples. Then over here, let me explain the general backend. So you have insert effects and just general volume, pan, tuning, basically all the stuff that you also have, in the front end of the instrument. I rarely ever touch these. Here you have controllers. Here's CC11. Here's CC7. If you ever want to add your own CC, you can do that. You just click on Add Modulator here, External Sources, MIDI CC, and then you can just add a CC for yourself. These ones I wouldn't touch. These are very specific to that instrument. They correspond with the script. Those are crossfade curves between the different layers, I think. If I remember correctly, it's been a while. But so usually in this area, you will see CC11, CC7, and any other CC that the developer put in here, basically. And then in these CCs, if you click on this, you can also see the curve. So this is linear. But if you, for example, prefer your CC7 to react slower at the bottom and then, more at the top, you can also change this curve into something like this, for example. Or if you prefer it to, rise faster in the lower region and then, taper off at the top volume, you can also change it to this. But a lot of the time we just leave it at 0. Oh God, this is just it's not ideal. Come on, there we go. But so that's the first thing that you can change, basically. Then if you go down further, I'm not sure I've ever used the instrument buses. I'm not sure if I ever touched that before. Definitely use the insert effects. These are all, you can see that the red B means they're bypassed right now. Those are the effects that are in the front as well. So if you go into the instrument in the front and you go to, I don't know, settings probably, you see all these effects here. So the scripter and the graphic designer have brought these buttons to the front. But if they're not in the front, that's basically where you can find those. In the instrument insert effects and also in the send effects. Here you can see you have a reverb, convolution reverb. This is the same reverb that is in the front. So if you go into the front to the main page, there's a reverb here that's turned on right now. But if I turn it off and we go back into the back end, see it's bypassed. That's the effect that is being controlled. You can also change this effect. If you don't like the reverb that this is coming with, you can just change the reverb into something else. Or, add something else that you want in here. Like this is where you can basically change all the effects. I don't think I ever touched the main effects either. And then at the bottom, sometimes it's closed like this, but at the bottom you have the envelope of the instrument. So attack, hold, decay, sustain, release. Sometimes I control that if, for my taste, in the shorts or in the releases, it rings out too long and there's a lot of dirt or noise or, just room noise on there, then sometimes I shorten the releases a little bit in this. But so that's the main stuff. And then you have these tabs up here. The script editor you usually don't have to go into. It's kind of pointless because the script is locked most of the time. So without a password, you can't actually access the script. And trust me, you also don't want to. It's confusing. If you don't know the Kontakt scripting language, don't touch it. Then you have the group editor. That's kind of handy if there's something you want to apply to all the samples, all the groups. You have this little button here that's called Edit All Groups. It'll mark all the groups. And whatever you do is going to be applied to everything globally. Be careful with that though, because you don't want to have that on by accident. Then you have the mapping editor, where you can see the actual zones where the samples are. So right now we are in non-vibrato, velocity 1, full mix. That's these samples. And this tells you a lot about how the instrument was actually sampled. It's very interesting. So here you can see it's actually a whole tone scale. So we sampled only every second note because we wanted as many open strings as possible to get the best resonance. And something you will also often see is that the last note is dragged out. That's why sometimes it sounds kind of shitty when you're at the highest edge of an instrument and you play a melody there, because it's the same sample that's being triggered over and over again. Because we only sample like 2 or 3 octaves and then we just drag out the last note over a fifth. And if you play too much there, then, you know, that's just one sample that's being triggered. And it sounds very meaty and meh. But so these are the different samples that you can see. If you click on Wave Editor, you can also see the corresponding wave file that goes with each sample. So for the sake of this video, let's just assume that I'm saying this C right here in the lowest velocity, like I'm composing something and I'm noticing something's wrong with this C. And I want to fix it. There are different things that I can fix now. In this particular library, normally here you can fine tune it. If you notice a sample is out of tune, this is where you can tune it, right here. In this library, it's locked because we actually went through, you can see this one is tuned 3 cents up, this 2 cents down, 8 cents up. So we've already tuned these. We did that. But if you have a library that doesn't have it locked, this is where you can control that. So, you know, say let's just go here. Say I'm playing this note right now. You know, and I'm like, it's a little too high. Then I would go in here and, you know, adjust that. Also something that happens sometimes, you're playing in one velocity, but one note is too loud or too soft. And it just sticks out and you don't like it because it's not balanced. The developer didn't go in and actually did volume balancing. Then you can do that here. You can click on the sample that is off. If I play it, you can see there's a red dot and you can also see which groups are playing. So this is how you can find the samples. You can also see later the release sample is kicking in once the note is done. Right there. That's how that works. Because the way sustained samples play is it plays the start, then it plays to here. This yellow thing is the loop point, or the part that loops over and over again if you hold the note longer. And so when it gets here, it'll jump back here and loop over and over again. Like we can probably, let's do that. See? That's why the longer you hold sustains, the more meaty it's going to sound because it's looping over and over again. But in this library in particular, we really tried to sample every note for at least 8 seconds so that we would have a very long loop point. If you have a worse library, usually they don't sample long enough sustains and then you have this really short loop and then it sounds very meaty. If you have a long loop like this one, it sounds less meaty because you're not playing the loop that often. Because usually, how long do you hold a sustain? I mean, you don't usually hold it for 30 seconds. But so once you release it, it'll jump into the release group and play the corresponding release sample to this one. So this group is just a duplicate of the other group, but then this is just the release. See? So that'll kick in when you let go of the note right here. Because this part is never played, actually. This is just in the release sample group. So the sample only ever plays until here. So I hope that makes sense. Now you also kind of understand why the script is so important and how much is happening. Imagine you're now playing crossfades between velocity layers, and you're going from non-vibrato to espressivo. You have multiple mic positions on, you have legato on, then you have all these loops going. Then it crossfades into different velocities, into legato samples, out of the legato sample into the next sustain. It crossfades also between the non-vibrato, vibrato, espressivo, and then all the release samples need to be triggered as well, and across multiple mic positions. That's a lot to handle for a computer and for Kontakt and for a script. So just be aware of what is actually happening here in the backend from just you playing a melody. But so this is where you can kind of, fix the tuning, fix the volume if some samples are louder than others. A good example here is also, let me go into the spiccato samples. I think I have some of that here as well. This is the first velocity, lowest velocity, spiccatos in the full mic. What's currently enabled is random round robin. So we're playing this note right here, and it's just randomly picking from these. These are all the same velocity, but it's, 8 round robins? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yes. So it's 8 round robins that are all triggered. We chose this layout because we already have so many groups. You can also put round robins into different groups. It's triggered by the script, so you can do it either way. But so our scripter chose this type of layout where all the round robins are in one group and they're just in different velocity layers. And then the velocity actually does not control the velocity itself. And so the script tells it, this is where these samples are, trigger them randomly. Now let's say I have this line and one of these would be out of time. Now we actually went through all these very tediously and timed them and did the volume balancing and tuning and everything. But let's just assume I have a library and one of these I notice is just not timed right and I want to find it and fix it. So then in this case, since random round robin is on, that would be very difficult to find. But so if you go into the front here, in the round robin tab, you can go, instead of random, you can go into cycle, which means it's just going to cycle through the round robins. So go back in here. And so now you can just, play the same note over and over again and then find the bad one. There currently isn't a bad one, but See, so now it's playing them all just in a row from the bottom. So let's say I find that this one is louder than the other ones. Again, then you would just, adjust the volume here. Or maybe one of them is out of tune. You would tune it here. Or if it's out of time, you have the sample start time. And usually you have a little bit of wiggle room here, ideally. Ideally, the sample developer has sampled it and edited it in a way that you have a little bit of wiggle room to the left and to the right. And then if you notice this one's a bit late, then you can just grab the sample start like so and drag it in. Or you notice it's a bit early, then you can drag it back. And you can just keep playing this on a loop until, it feels like, it's all in time. But you will see that a lot of this is already adjusted. If you look at the volume here, you will see that some samples see -2. So they naturally got louder here in the higher register. So we had to, make that a bit softer so that it sounds cohesive. Because players are, even if they're studio players, they're not 100% consistent. So you do need to go in, see -1. We already went in and, adjusted quite a bit, so that it sounds cohesive when you're playing an ostinato, because you don't want random notes sticking out. But so this is how you would find the bad sample and, find the bad round robin and just fix it there. And then if you notice, for example, one of the releases, let's go into one of the release groups, say this one, and you're playing and you're somewhere in like, say in the highest velocity, it's usually easier to find, and you're playing this note and you're noticing there's like a huge noise here that you can hear. You can also adjust the sample end, of course, and drag it in. Or you can also, of course, adjust the ring out of the sample at the very end. But so that's how you can fix those. Finding the sample is usually the harder job than fixing the sample. Sometimes you can also fix an entire group's output level. You can see we've already fixed it a little bit here because we normalized the sample set. So this group is at plus 12 dB, and then this one is at plus 6, 0, minus 3, minus 6. So basically we've kind of evened out the loudness of the different groups. So the lowest velocity, we pushed the volume up a little bit, and the highest velocities, we've pushed it down a bit, just to have the sound be a little more even. But if you don't like that, you can always, of course, change that. And just, if you want the soft to be softer, this is where you can do that. I don't know if we locked that in the script or not in this one, but normally it's not locked. So you can just adjust it if you think the volumes are too even and you want the contrast to be larger, or the contrast is too large and you want it to be more even, then you can kind of do that here. Just always remember to do a save as. You would do that here. So just be sure to, save the patch before you make any changes, because you don't want to mess it up. And then you have to re-download and, Let me show you one in case you have a bad rhythmic loop. Now, I don't use loops all that much, but so here's Deep Percussion Beds 2. So if you go into the mapping and wave editor here and say you're playing, I don't know, this one, and you're noticing something is off, you're changing the tempo in your DAW and it just sounds like it's stumbling, you can go further down here. Like you would just find the loop that you're looking for. Let's just assume it's this one. And this is where we were at before with the yellow thing, with the loop. It's the same here, but in this case, we also enabled sync and slice. Kontakt has Time Machine Pro and Beat Machine. Those are two different, I think they're different algorithms to use basically the time stretch function where you have loops, but you can, it syncs to the grid of your DAW. So you can change the tempo of the loop. So say one of this is, stumbling, then you can always just play through it. And so these little blue things, they are the slices, so to speak. It's where the transients sit, and it's the information that the algorithm uses to stretch and to compress the audio as you're changing the tempo. But so if someone made a mistake here, or they just used the automatic function and didn't manually adjust everything, then sometimes you can have slightly stumbling loops that aren't syncing 100%. So then you can just zoom in, play through it, and just make sure everything is actually sliced correctly. And then you can grab these thingies here and actually drag them to the right spot if you're noticing something is off. So these aren't off, obviously, because I remember we actually went in and manually made sure everything is right. But if one of them was off, this is where you could fix it. Also, sometimes I've had it before where a developer put in the wrong initial tempo, because this engine needs to know in what tempo the loop was recorded in order to then stretch it. So if the tempo input here is wrong, or also I've had this before where the meter was wrong, it was saying it was 4.4, but it was actually 6.8 or something, then the engine does not know very well what to do because it's basing its algorithm on the wrong numbers. So sometimes you need to fix that too. It can happen. And then here's an example for a bad sample. I think this is the patch that I have fixed the most in my life. This celeste is just weirdly noisy. Like, I remember the D, for example, had some noise on some velocity. There, can you hear that? There's a noise on the highest velocity. And so, remember, we're currently just in the full mix. So here you have the other mic positions too. If you want to make the change across the mic positions, because all the mic positions are going to have that noise in them, then you need to go into edit all groups. Just remember that. I'll just do it for this one right now. So I don't like that sample. So I'll just delete it. Just delete the zone. You can see this instrument was actually sampled chromatically and not in a whole tone scale. And so now I can just take a neighboring sample of the same velocity and drag it down. That's going to work. Or I can use this one and drag it up. There you go. A clean D. I remember there was another one. I think it was the mid velocity of this. Yeah, can you hear that little noise on there? It wouldn't bother me if it was one note, but if you're playing a run or like chords that use that note a lot, you have that noise on every single time you play it, because there are no round robins as far as I can see. So that's a problem. So this would be another note that I would find and then take out. So it seems to be the mid velocity on this one. So that's that note right here. Get rid of it. And then either drag this one down or this one up. That one's nicer. And then just leave it. This one has a lot of noisy samples in it, so I actually took out a bunch. I have like a whole fixed version patch where I took out all the bad samples. And then you just save it, and that's it. And now the bad samples are gone. You lost a sample, so to speak, but that's fine. It's a lot of samples, so don't worry about it. And now you'd have to either do that manually in every other group, of course, across the mic positions, or you could have just gone into edit all groups, and then this would happen. Like I think you'd have to, mark them all, and then, get rid of all of them at once. But that's how I get rid of bad samples. Or badly timed samples with noises in the releases, or weirdly loud samples, weirdly soft samples. If I don't like something, I can just go in here, find the sample or the entire sample group that I want to change, and then I change that. If I don't like some of the effects or the defaults that they chose, I can go in and just change it right here. Here you can see the CC11 and CC7 again. The lag, by the way, determines how quickly, when you move a fader, how quickly it actually registers the movement. You don't usually want it to be at 0, because that means basically the moment you touch the fader, it starts writing automation. It's way too sensitive. Most people I prefer a lag of 250 in here. Some people go even to 1,000. So there's a little bit of lag as you're moving a fader before it starts to, write the information. I think that's it. That's all there is to it. Same thing, envelope. Same thing, here are the effects. Whether you want them or not, you can change them. And that's the whole magic to it. And that's how you fix your Kontakt patches. Kontakt does have some bugs. It's been a while, so I don't remember 100%. But if you want to know more about this backend thing, I would suggest you either try it out, just save the patch, try it out, see what happens. Worst case, you break it and delete the patch and go back to the original, do another save as. That's how I usually do it. Or just, read the manual. I'm pretty sure that information is in there. And it also changes because it had so many bugs, especially when you were editing multiple groups at the same time, and when you were using batch functions. But it's possible that they fixed these bugs by now, because I haven't really worked in sampling since 2015, maybe 16. So a lot probably has changed in Kontakt ever since. But so I hope this kind of gives you a good idea of what you actually can do in the back end. Just always test things out, see what happens. Some things will be locked in the script depending on how the script works. And some things, for some reason, are just not going to give you the desired result. But this is kind of the basic gist of the thing. I hope this was helpful and you can fix some of your patches now and not rip your hair out anymore. Like and subscribe, buy me a beer, and I'll see you in the next one.